On the way out, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson makes an announcement that could affect Britain's departure from the European Union in October. Why the Queen had to get involved. Poland trip preview. President Donald Trump is set to visit the majority Catholic country this weekend. We're at the White House. The Vatican and China. The first two bishops are installed since the landmark agreement between the Holy See and Beijing. And obey God, not men. The Holy Father has advice for the faithful. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to suspend Parliament in a matter of days. The move is widely believed to be a step towards Britain leaving the European Union without a deal on October 31st.
As I said on the steps of Downing Street, we're not going to wait until October the 31st before getting on with our plans to take this country forward. And this is a new government with a very exciting agenda.
To suspend Parliament, Johnson had to secure permission from Queen Elizabeth II. The decision infuriated opponents like Jeremy Corbyn. It gives him and other anti-Brexit lawmakers far less time to try and block the United Kingdom's departure from the EU. President Donald Trump is traveling to Poland this weekend. The visit will mark 80 years since the start of World War II. The president will also highlight the bond between the U.S. and Poland, a country with a rich Catholic history. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Wyatt, President Trump soon leaves for his second trip to Poland, a nation greatly influenced by Pope St. John Paul II. Today we spoke to a former U.S. ambassador who told us about the Pope's impact as Poland moved from communism to democracy.
And this is a poster child of free market democratic success.
Former U.S. Ambassador Dan Fried says Poland is thriving and is seen as a key American ally in Europe.
A shared commitment to democracy is what drives the Polish-American relationship forward. And it's essential fuel for the future.
Eric Stewart, the president of the U.S.-Poland Business Council, says the relationship is mutual.
Poles love America, and that bodes well for, President Trump developing a relationship with the president of Poland. He likes to be liked, and we are liked by the Poles.
President Trump's trip will commemorate 80 years since the outbreak of World War II that began with the Nazi invasion of Poland. This past June marked 40 years since Pope John Paul II made a pilgrimage back to his native country, then under communist rule. A presidential message released by the White House recalled the occasion, stating, "In his homily 40 years ago, St. Pope John Paul II delivered a powerful message of hope to the crowd gathered in Warsaw, to all of Poland, and to the world." The former ambassador to Poland tells us the Holy Father provided crucial leadership leading to the fall of communism in Poland.
His trip to Poland in 1979, when he said, "Be not afraid," seemed to wake up Polish society. And the communists didn't know how to receive him.
Dan Fried believes John Paul II hasn't gotten the credit he deserves.
And the Holy Father played a tremendous role. I'm not Catholic. Someone who watched Poland and saw this impact, that's tremendous.
President Trump leaves Saturday for Poland. Ahead of his trip, in a letter, 23 former Polish ambassadors are calling on the president to stop sowing divisions within the European Union and NATO, reminding him that Poland relies on those alliances for its security and long-term survival. At the White House, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Brazil accepts airplanes from Chile to help fight the fires in the Amazon. Chilean officials sent 4 planes to try and help put out the devastating blaze. Lingering smoke in the Amazon reportedly is causing increased respiratory problems, particularly among children and the elderly. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro also continues his war of words with France's leader, Emmanuel Macron. Bolsonaro says he won't accept a pledge of $20 million from the group of 7 nations until the French leader apologizes over a personal dispute. Japan's downgrading of South Korea trade status took effect today. Officials in Seoul say they are being treated like an enemy state.
우리에 대해 신뢰할 수 없다는 국가라는 점을 최근 2번이나 언급하면서
South Korean leaders also accused Japan of weaponizing trade. Tokyo's decision has hurt relations between the countries, both U.S. allies. Also, as part of the fallout, Seoul says it no longer will share military intelligence with Japan. 2 Chinese bishops have been installed with the Holy Father's blessing this week. The Vatican confirms Monsignor Stefano Huang-Wei and Anthony Yao Shun both received papal approval. Their ordinations are the first since the Vatican and Beijing reached an agreement last September over naming bishops. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Edward, what can you tell us about the new bishops?
Okay, White. Well, the 2 bishops. The first one is Bishop Anthony Yao Shun, who's 54 years old. He's been appointed to Jinying Parish Diocese, and he's a liturgical expert, we understand, and studied in the United States actually for 4 years. And the second one is Bishop Stefano Huang-Wei, who's Bishop of Hangzhou. And this has been in the past a very divided diocese, divided between the underground church and the church, the state-run church. He is actually only 44 years old, and they've both been consecrated. The first 2 bishops consecrated after this Vatican-Chinese agreement.
And as you know, the Vatican received quite a bit of criticism after the landmark deal with China. The deal centered around the issue of naming bishops. So take us back here, Edward. What was the problem, and do we know what the terms of the agreement are?
Right, yes, the problems in the past have been that bishops would be appointed by the Chinese Patriotic Association, which is the state-run church, and they would appoint them without the Pope's permission, without Rome's permission, and that often led to tensions and even excommunications. So under this new agreement, they're supposed to be allowed, the Chinese Patriotic Association, they're allowed to select the bishops, they propose them to the Pope, and then the Pope is supposed to be able to choose them, or choose one from a list, and also to have a veto if necessary. So that's how the agreement is supposed to play out, but it's still a secret agreement. We don't actually know all the details of them yet.
You mentioned how before the Chinese government, the communist government, appointed their own bishops, but take me back again. Up until now, how has the church, under the authority of the Pope, operated in China?
Right, well, there's been a long time, since 1957, since there's a break in diplomatic ties. There's been what's being called an unofficial underground church, which is church loyal to Rome. And then there's the state-run church, which is the one run by the Chinese Communist Party. And those divisions have obviously been very, very severe in the past. They've caused a lot of friction and conflict, a lot of torture even, and imprisonment of bishops and priests loyal to Rome. But that has changed, the Vatican says, so they're wanting that to change under this new agreement. There's been a pathway to reconciliation over the past 30 years or so, but it's really stepped up, people say, because of this agreement. But opponents are suspicious of it, and they feel that it's actually caving in to the Chinese authorities, and it's actually giving them, compromising really with the Chinese Communist Party.
It certainly is a very divisive issue as to how to handle this subject, and as you say, with so much history and decades of issues on this. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, thanks so much for the update.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI is responding to criticism of his essay on the clergy abuse crisis. He says the many negative reactions confirm his central thesis that alienation from the faith is at the heart of the scandal. He adds most of the criticisms did not mention God. Pope Benedict's essay was published in April by Catholic News Agency and the National Catholic Register. 2 clergy abuse survivors are speaking out tonight, telling the Associated Press about the controversial settlements they received. The abuse happened 25 years ago. Correspondent Jason Calvi joins us to talk about their stories. Jason?
The 2 survivors say the Franciscans paid each of them $15,000, but they had to sign papers agreeing to keep silent. The U.S. Bishop's 2002 charter to protect young people bans confidential settlements like theirs unless the victim asks for it. Now we're hearing directly from these men in Mississippi. Poverty is everywhere in Greenwood, Mississippi, and it's something Joshua Love cannot escape.
I can't accomplish nothing here. It's like every time I come here, it's like I'm sitting on a rock.
So when a $15,000 payment was put in front of both Joshua Love and his cousin LaJarvis Love, It was hard to turn down.
So they probably feel like we ain't never had that type of money before.
They say it's because they were abused by two Franciscan brothers.
Sometimes when I'm sitting there in church, I cannot sit there a whole hour. You know, I just had to go outside and get some air because the brothers touched me in the church.
They were just 9 and 10 years old when it started. Students at St. Francis School in Greenwood.
He abused me. He molested me. He touched me.
In 2017, LaJarvis shared his abuse claim. This year, both men received $15,000 settlements, agreeing not to share their story.
What could we do? You know, we don't have access to lawyers and things of that nature. So, you know, in a sense, you feel like you got to take what you can.
Most settlements between the church and clergy sex abuse survivors are far higher. The Diocese of Jackson lists the two Franciscans on their website of credibly accused. Brother Donald Lucas was found dead in 1999 of an apparent suicide. And Paul West left the order, but the AP found he was still teaching at a Catholic school until at least 2010.
Hi.
Hello.
Are you Paul West?
Yes.
We were wondering if we could talk to you about some things that happened down at St. Francis School in Greenwood, Mississippi.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You don't know what I'm talking about? Didn't you work there for a while?
But now, 25 years later, LaJarvis is finally sharing his story. He says he's looking for help to be more of a rock for his own family. And cousin Joshua Love can sometimes be found sitting on his porch in a beat-up desk he calls his thinking chair.
It makes me feel like I'm still happy because it's a school chair. I guess there's that child inside me that still want to sit there and learn.
And a lawyer plans to sue on behalf of the Loves, seeking a larger settlement, and Mississippi's Attorney General is investigating. In a statement, the Franciscans say they're brokenhearted about the abuse which took place and have provided assistance to two of the men that has not been made public. Wyatt.
Such a sad story, Jason, but just so important that we bring this to the surface and point out what's happened. Correspondent Jason Calvey reporting. Thanks, Jason. Coming up, a Republican senator announces his retirement, and lawmakers in one state push to support Planned Parenthood. Senator Johnny Isakson of Georgia says he will retire at the end of this year. The 74-year-old Republican says he still loves his job, but health issues are taking a toll on him. Isakson was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2013. While in office, he voted in favor of several pro-life measures. A federal appeals court upholds a ruling blocking part of an Indiana abortion law. The new legislation is supposed to make it tougher for underage girls to have an abortion without telling their parents. But the new ruling means a 2018 injunction remains in place. The state generally bars abortions for minors leaving at home without their parents' consent, but it does grant exceptions. New Jersey Right to Life is urging residents to fight back against what it sees as an attempt by state Democrats to, quote, foot the bill for Planned Parenthood's abortion business. Lawmakers have proposed legislation that would give an additional $9.5 million for clinics withdrawing from the Title X program. Planned Parenthood announced last week that it's pulling out of the federal family planning program rather than abide by a new Trump administration rule prohibiting clinics from referring women for abortions. Joining me now by Skype from Piscataway, New Jersey is Marie Tacey, Executive Director for New Jersey Right to Life. Marie, welcome in. If this legislation passes in your state, where would this $9.5 million come from? And who loses out here?
It will come from the taxpayers, and the taxpayers will lose out because we will be complicit in the performance of abortion.
And how do people in New Jersey feel about the issue of abortion?
Well, the majority of people, regardless of where they stand on abortion, and polls have shown this, do not want their money being used to pay for abortions. But the legislature completely ignores the fact that people don't want to pay for abortion, and they're abusing their power. They did not put this before the voters of New Jersey. They didn't seek any, voter approval or input. And now they're going to fund them an additional $9.5 million when they already provided $10.5 million in the FY 2020 budget.
Governor Phil Murphy, a Democrat and a Catholic himself, has not said whether he supports the measure. What has his record been so far on pro-life issues?
Absolutely terrible. One of the first things he did as governor is to restore funding to Planned Parenthood that Governor Christie had cut for 8 years. And during that time, it's important to note that not one woman came forward to say she could not receive health care because Planned Parenthood was not given taxpayer funds. Governor Christie redirected the funds to federally qualified health centers. There are over 100 of them in the state of New Jersey. Clearly, women were able to get their health care. We heard testimony after testimony at all the hearings. The Department of Health testified. Not one woman came forward to say she couldn't get her health care. This is all it's just such nonsense. It really is, that women can't get their health care unless Planned Parenthood is funded. Planned Parenthood is not part of the state. They're not an arm of the state. There's no obligation to fund them with our tax dollars.
You had mentioned that New Jersey residents have not had the chance to voice their opposition to this legislation. If this moves forward, how soon could we see a vote on it, and how is New Jersey Right to Life mobilizing residents against the effort?
They're talking about having a vote in September in both houses, and we are encouraging all of our members and everyone knows to share it with 10 people and have them share it so far, to make sure that people know what's going on and to contact their legislators. We have an alert up on our website. We will get people down to Trenton for the vote to show that there is significant opposition to this measure.
Marie, as someone who has worked in the pro-life movement for over 25 years, you fought many of these battles. What are you doing there in New Jersey as we get closer to the 2020 elections, and how do you prepare for that?
Well, it's a real uphill battle here in New Jersey, but we work very hard, and we have a lot of very loyal supporters, thank God, and we do a whole lot of praying, and we're not giving up. We're just going to keep fighting. We're going to keep on letting our legislators know how we feel. We are going to let people know that elections matter, and it's really important to vote at election time. And we've seen that at the federal level, we see it at the state level, and we're going to keep on fighting.
Okay, well, I'm sure a lot of pro-lifers all across the country feel the same way you do and share that sentiment. Marie Tacey, Executive Director for New Jersey Right to Life, thanks so much for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me, Wyatt. Take care.
Oregon says it no longer will use federal money for its family planning clinics. It made the decision after the Trump administration imposed the new rules barring clinics who receive federal funding from referring patients for an abortion. The state has used so-called Title X money since 1970. And in the state of Washington, the Archdiocese of Seattle is facing questions after a local man received a formal blessing at Mass shortly before committing medically assisted suicide. The HIV and cancer patient died in May. The Archdiocese says the priest was unaware of the man's plans before he gave the blessing. Archdiocesan officials are investigating. For more on this story, including what the church teaches on the issue of assisted suicide, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Up next, Catholic leaders are speaking out over a political appointment in Virginia, and the key to a Christian life according to Pope Francis. A Democratic activist has resigned from Virginia's Council on Women after she was found to have sent several anti-Catholic messages on social media. Catholic officials had requested the state governor rescind the invitation. Bishop Michael Burbidge of the Diocese of Arlington said in a statement, quote, "We expect anyone appointed to a council, board, or commission for the Commonwealth to be respectful of all faith groups and civil in his or her public comments. Her statements are offensive to Catholics and our faith." Richmond Bishop Barry Nestout joined in the statement. And joining us now is Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer for the Diocese of Arlington. Billy, welcome. We're referring, of course, to Gail Gordon Donegan's social media posts about Catholics. Some of these are just too offensive to read out loud, but one on Ash Wednesday said in 2011, "Go tell a Catholic they have dirt on their forehead. #ways to offend." What's the nature, without using bad words, what's the nature of what she's posting about?
Well, as offensive as that is, it's actually one of the tamer. I mean, most of them are very derogatory. They refer to sexual abuse of minors in a kind of a joking light. It's supposed to be a satirical Twitter account, but it certainly didn't come across that way. It was very pointed and very disrespectful. And our point has been that if someone's going to be appointed to a committee or a council or anything by the governor, an appointment's an important thing. They shouldn't have a demonstrated history of intolerance toward any religious faith, let alone our own Catholic faith. So Bishop Burbidge and Bishop Nestout wrote a letter to the governor on Monday stating that they obviously thought that this should be rescinded, this appointment should be rescinded. And then on Tuesday, an alert was sent out through the Virginia Catholic Conference, and we've seen a great response to that, and it was encouraging the faithful to tell the governor how you feel. Our public officials don't know how we feel until we tell them. So we've seen a great response. About 1,200 people emailed since yesterday afternoon alone, and then that doesn't include phone calls. We had a lot of people saying, we want a phone number. We want to be able to call and tell them directly what we think. So this is a very appropriate response now because she has rescinded, or she stepped down basically from the appointment. And that was a very appropriate and very welcomed outcome.
What role do you think media coverage played in her resignation, if anything?
I think it played an important role. Sometimes light is a good disinfectant, and it's appropriate that if this is an appointment to be made, that the governor would have to stand by that. And given these comments, given these tweets and the offensive nature of it, and the fact that it's attacking a religious group, it was very appropriate that she stepped down, and I think the media spotlight helped illuminate the problem here. It wasn't about the media exposure, it was really about the problem and what she was saying.
Governor Ralph Northam himself has stirred up controversy with his comments on late-term abortion in particular. There's also a photo that surfaced of him in his 1984 medical school yearbook page showing a man in blackface, another in Ku Klux Klan outfit you might remember. Are you surprised there wasn't more of an outcry from the Virginia legislature over this appointment?
Absolutely. And let's imagine a situation where the comment she made about Ash Wednesday was made about someone wearing a yarmulke or hijab. Would that appointment have ever been made? Of course not. Absolutely not. So I am surprised there wasn't more outcry from other political forces to say that this is an inappropriate appointment and she should step down. But again, in the end, the appropriate thing happened. She apologized and she removed herself from that post, and that was the right call.
Billy, what should we as Catholics do in response to this kind of bigotry when we see things like this online?
I think there's a couple things people can do. One, the power of their own social media shouldn't be underestimated. When you offer your voice on social media, you're relaying your faith in a very unique way and a very personal way. And that's a very helpful thing to the church. It's also helpful, I think, for our own faith to really publicly stand by what we believe. I think also the importance of our state Catholic conferences. Bishop Burbidge and Bishop Nestout are great leaders for our state conference. They're willing to write to the governor and say personally, and the faithful followed. The faithful responded to that call when they asked them, please tell the governor what you think too. That had a lot of impact. So I encourage people to go to their state Catholic conference websites, rsvacatholic.org, and sign up for most of them have an e-newsletter. Sign up, learn more about the public policy issues that are going on. It's only through those sometimes that you'll hear about this. Like you said, not all media covered it. Many did, gratefully EWTN certainly did, but it's a great thing to know what's happening so that you can respond and you can live your faith out in such a direct and personal way.
And it was very important that we cover it, and we're happy to have you on to talk about the issues. Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer for the Catholic Diocese of Arlington. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Pope Francis says the key to Christian life is to obey God.
Senza riserve, senza rinvii, senza calcoli.
During his weekly gathering with pilgrims, the Holy Father says to obey God means to listen to him without reservations. Pope Francis added Christians need to look after the sick. The sick and disturbed were all healed at the hands of the apostles. Good reminders from the Holy Father. And that wraps up our newscast for tonight. We thank you for watching. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. We'll end tonight with more images from today's weekly meeting with pilgrims at the Vatican. Good night, and God bless.